What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app and or platform you are listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we're going to do a little bit of a different feel than what we normally do on these in-season episodes. This comment's awesome. K.M. Moriarty saying fleeing from the Sabres game. My guest is doing the exact same thing. I am doing the same thing a little bit as well. Sabres are dumpster fire. We really could just do like a Sabres kind of group therapy session if anybody wants to jump in. So feel free. But in tonight's episode, a little bit of a different feel. Back end of the episode, we're going to dive into some Bills, Chargers specifics, some advanced metrics, some details that kind of paint who and what they are, aside from, you know, how wounded and reeling of a team they are in lieu of, or in light of, you know, getting waxed by the Raiders last week and then firing, you know, their GM, Tom Telesco, their head coach, Brandon Staley, and all of that. There are some interesting pieces and intricacies to that Chargers team. We're going to dive into that on the back end of the episode, but in the forefront and in the main opening portion of this episode, we're going to do a little bit of a Buffalo Bills pulse check. There's been a lot of things that have been going on with this team recently in terms of, you know, kind of clawing their way back into the playoff picture, the pieces with Sean McDermott, the change in offensive coordinator, and, you know, kind of rise of the offense a little bit. So for the beginning of this episode and the main portion to open the show, we're going to do a little bit of a Buffalo Bills pulse check. And to do that, I'm joined by Mr. Alex Brasky, sports editor of Batavia Daily News and editor of Bills Digest. Alex, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. And, you know, or maybe you should thank me for me giving you shelter from the Sabres. I don't know where the thank you should go, but either way, I appreciate you taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, as we discussed off air, certainly taking refuge from the latest Sabres destruction, this one coming at the hands of, I believe, the 28th team in the league, the Columbus Blue Jackets. So really the roller coaster ride continues and something's got to give. But I see Kyle Oposo just scored. It's now, I think, 7-2.
Oh, boy. It's like throwing a deck chair off the Titanic and then hoping like it doesn't sink. Yeah, that's just, there's just, and I think like this is where that joke always comes in. Like there's like some law where like the Bills and Sabres can never be good at the same time. And like if one starts to turn positive, the other one has to immediately like dovetail and like start to spiral out. And, you know, for Bills fans or for people who gear themselves more towards the Buffalo Bills, the Sabres falling apart. And if you believe, you know, in that kind of theory a little bit, means the Buffalo Bills are trending upwards. And they have been these past couple of weeks, you know, coming out of the bye at 6-6, they have a good victory against the Kansas City Chiefs, you know, depending on how you view that team. And then a very strong victory against one of the best teams in football, the Dallas Cowboys. And they go into week 16 against the Chargers sitting there at 8-6. But Alex, you know, like I said before I brought you on, you know, I wanted to get your thoughts here on this team and kind of just, you know, the pulse check of this Bills team, because so much has happened. And, you know, as a person with, you know, the connections to the team and the insider access that you have, I thought it was awesome to bring you on. So the first question I want to get into with you, you know, you had a quote from Sean McDermott regarding the change in offensive coordinator, you know, the firing of Ken Dorsey and shift to Joe Brady. And it was a real simple quote. You know, you just had him as quote, there's a different energy more than anything. And that was Sean McDermott in reference to Joe Brady. And again, with you being a person who is around this team and in person with this team, that different kind of energy, is that something you can tangibly see or feel? Like, is that something that's like a real aspect to you with this team?
Yeah, I believe it was Matt Perino who generated that quote. It was a good question from him to lead off Sean McDermott's press conference yesterday. But absolutely, I believe it's been tangible over the past several weeks, ever since they relieved Ken Dorsey of his duties, brought in Joe Brady or elevated him into this interim OC role. His energy is palpable, just out there on the practice field. I posted a photo, I believe it was Brady's first practice out there in front of the media, and just seeing him interact with the players and really break things down on an individual drill-to-drill or play-to-play basis was something you hadn't seen from Ken Dorsey throughout the course of the season. And that's not to say Dorsey wasn't doing good work during the practices and doing it in his own way. I was a proponent of Dorsey's throughout the early portions of the season. I didn't believe that all the blame for the Bills' offensive woes should have fallen on his shoulders, but nonetheless, he was let go, and Brady has come in and really elevated this group, and namely elevated Josh Allen back to the happy-go-lucky Josh Allen that we saw throughout the majority of his career. I think his excitement and just his kid-like mentality is back game in and game out. And I think you're seeing it play out on the field every game.
I remember you posting that photo of Brady early in his, again, like ascension to OC. And, you mentioned that kind of like how he is in juxtaposition with Ken Dorsey, whether for better or for worse. But, could you expand upon that a little bit? Like what was, Ken Dorsey like, kind of behind the scenes in a practice environment to you, like from an energy standpoint or just kind of like inner workings type of feel for him?
Yeah, the best way I could say it, I think Brady is a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more regularly throughout the practice. It's not like Dorsey wasn't there contributing, talking to his receivers, talking to Josh Allen, working things out. But I think Brady's really made it a point to up that part of his coaching style and really make it a point to go out there and bring the energy every practice and bring that extra communication with those receivers and Josh Allen. And you've heard him say numerous times, if Josh Allen doesn't like a play, take it out of the game plan. And I think he's doing all he can to kind of determine what best fits his quarterback and what best fits this team. And like I said, not to say Ken Dorsey wasn't doing that. I just think Brady's going about it maybe in a bit more hands-on, energetic way than we saw from Dorsey over the course of his time here in Buffalo.
I was in a similar boat, with you with the struggles, under Ken Dorsey this year. I didn't think everything really deserved to be put on his shoulders or laid at his feet. You look at all the things from, the play of Josh Allen and I do recognize the notion of, things starting at the top and Dorsey setting him up for success and yada, yada. But, some of the decision making and throws from Allen, some of the poor turnover luck and all these things, kind of, again, rightfully or wrongly, were laid at the feet of Ken Dorsey. But when you look at what this offense has done, again, small sample size and, the league not really knowing what to expect from Joe Brady, there's been tangible results in this turnaround. And, I'm very X's and O's based and on the field and schematics and this concept versus this coverage and so on and so forth. But I think there is something to be said for the energy piece of it, like you say, because I think what gets lost, and I've said this on the show and on the film room that, we do on the channel with Eric, like these coordinator jobs and head coach jobs, for as much as it is about like football and X's and O's and schematics, it is very much like you're a people manager. Like as much as you're just like a manager and you work in a warehouse and you have a team, like a regular 9 to 5 or something like that. You're a people manager and you have to manage all these personalities and energy levels and skill levels. And added on top of all of that, you're managing these people who make millions and millions of dollars, and you're trying to get all those personalities to gel and get it all to fit on one page. And do you think for Joe Brady, do you think with how he's operated thus far, like, do you see that as being a sustainable model, like the type of energy he brings? And again, small sample size and what we've seen thus far, but kind of your projection for how sustainable, like the way he runs that ship is going forward.
Yeah, you always hear that NFL head coaches are much like CEOs of major corporations, the amount of people that they have to manage, the decisions that they have to make. And it really just filters on down to the assistant coach level. And each time we've spoken with Joe Brady over Zoom following a game, it really seems like he either didn't sleep a lot the night before or he just left it all out there on game day. I'm sure the latter is more so the case. But to answer your question, if it's sustainable, I would say yes, just because that's how these guys are wired. They've been built their entire lives in this profession to leave it all out there each week and to take the extra hours and to work the extra time and figuring out the game plan and deciphering any little intricate factor in that game plan that can outdo the opponent. And I think Joe Brady's just a guy with a ball full of energy every morning that he wakes up. He said the other day that there is a little caffeine involved, but it's just natural. He said he loves this game. He goes out there every day and does what he loves to do. And I think that's a major part of it. When you're doing what you love to do, the extra hours and all that energy that you put into it, it really doesn't seem like it at the end of the day, because like I said, you're fulfilling your passion and you're out there living exactly how you want to.
Very well said. Very well said. Let's pivot to the other side of the ball. Well, technically the other side of the ball, but more so the head coach, Sean McDermott. we know the story that came out during Chiefs week and, however anybody feels about that. But, after that game, we saw and we heard the responses from the players in the locker room, the whole, like, we got your back, coach. We saw what Brandon Beane said and the feeling and the energy. We saw a couple of, individual presser pieces from Ed Oliver after the game, Micah Hyde leading into that game. And, I've joked about it, and I know some other people who joked about it, but like after the Bills won that game, that kind of was the joke of like that piece came out and like little things of like, oh, McDermott like wanted that piece to come out. And he was all the sources. So that way it would like bring the team together and give them both more material, all those little jokes and things like that. But do you think, given, again, small sample size, what we've seen these past 2 weeks, what we heard and have seen from players and Brandon Beane and, interviews and pressers and all this kind of stuff. Do you think that piece that came out had like any real type of galvanization towards this team or bringing this team together and kind of fueling them going forward?
It certainly seemed like that, huh? Ever since that piece came out and the support you mentioned, you heard from Ed Oliver, I think was most over the top in his support, calling those sources cowards and going anonymous and really attacking Sean McDermott's character in that piece. And I think it was really a case of, I think we've all kind of been in this situation. When you have problems with somebody that you're close with or you work for or you work with, it's kind of okay for you to go at them, but it's not okay for an outside source to come in and attack them, if you know what I mean. It's like that's our guy. It's okay for us to go at him, but not for you to. And I think that's kind of a sense of what the Bills are dealing with right now. Just when you have that level of respect for somebody and they've done so much for you over the course of your career, as a lot of these guys have alluded to over the past several years, even if you don't like everything that coach has to bring to the table, you have that level of respect. And I think you've seen that shine through with these players in their response to that article. And if you have any sort of empathy whatsoever as a human being, and you have that respect for Sean McDermott, you're going to go out there, you're going to try to play your ass off for a guy who really, like I said, it was kind of a character assassination in that Ty Dunn piece with all those anonymous sources and really going beyond the football field, really attacking his character and his personal decision making. And I just thought it was a little bit much. And I think a lot of the players felt that way as well. And you've seen them respond on the field and maybe use that as a bit of a galvanizing force.
Were you surprised at all by kind of like and you don't have to speak directly to the piece, but like the character assassination aspect of it? Cause I've always understood the tactical criticisms of Sean McDermott. Like I get the game management things and challenges or, certain aspects in terms of like run versus pass and calls on defense, soft coverages versus like when to blitz and so on and so forth. I've understood the on-field criticisms. But I've always seen him as this, if he is a little bit cringy behind the scenes with what he uses and what he says, that's a completely different piece. But I've always seen him as this good leader and this guy who built this culture. And, we've seen it throughout the years. Like even I remember the comment immediately when Emmanuel Sanders came in and talked about what the organization was like and what the building was like. And he talked about that being an extension of Sean McDermott, and Von Miller, echoed similar sentiments when he came in. Were you surprised at all to see, like, I guess Sean McDermott's like character coming into question more so than like his on-field game management aspects?
Certainly. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. And obviously with the comments about the 9/11 terrorist attacks, that criticism is warranted. Certainly a slip up, and McDermott has addressed that multiple times, reportedly with the team and now with the media. But yeah, I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. And listen, Ty Dunn has been in this business a lot longer than I have. He has a lot of support within the Bills beat writer community. So there's a lot of respect there for Ty Dunn. I don't think this is necessarily an all-encompassing statement against his ability as a writer or anything. I just had a problem with this individual piece and the way that it went after McDermott. And really the one thing that stood out to me was the anecdote of McDermott claiming that he stayed late or slept in the office or something, and an assistant coach basically called him a liar. I don't understand where what you got out of that anecdote other than to attack his character and like I said, make him come out to be a liar. So I think when you're covering these teams, I think it's important to keep the personal aspect in mind. And I think that kind of went out the window here. And I think it's been said by numerous people, if Ty was working for, let's say, a newspaper or an online publication, I'm not so sure that story would have been published the way it was with all those anonymous sources. Him working for himself independently certainly played to his advantage in that respect.
Oh, that's a good point too. Like, and that's something I considered, but like as a person who's not in the media and on the beat, kind of like you are, like I don't fully know that side. But that's a good point too. Like, there's that when you are working for a public publication, no pun intended. Like there is that kind of system of checks and balances with how your work gets put out. So that's very interesting point. But again, regardless,
I think there's liability concerns also when you're a part of a bigger organization using all those anonymous sources to cite things like that of that nature. I think there would be concerns in that regard as well.
In things like that, like this isn't Bills related, but like how many how many anonymous sources is there, like a rule, or like is like a type of regulation or type of like general like structure or rule of thumb? Like I've never seen something where it's like we have all our sources are anonymous and it's a lot.
Yeah, like I said, we're getting a little deep in here, and I haven't been on the beat long enough or dealt in anonymous sources long enough to really give you an education on this. But I just go based on what I've learned and what I've read from people who have been on the beat longer than I have, and namely Chuck Pollock, who used to work for the Olean Times-Herald, who Ty was an intern for, and Chuck wrote in support of Ty, but within his support, he did mention how he didn't believe how that story would have been published if Ty had been working for a newspaper or something. So I'm not sure of the rule of thumb when it comes to dealing with anonymous sources. I think there's better sources, for lack of a better term, to ask than me, kind of a neophyte in this business. But in the same vein, I think I do know well enough that I'm just not sure I would have been comfortable with something like that.
Very fair. And again, the Bills have kind of, turned the corner potentially positively coming out of, that Chiefs week, again, with that win against the Chiefs, then this win this past week against Dallas. And, that Chiefs week with that story, in addition to everything they've gone through this year, like the firing of Ken Dorsey, the injuries that they've had on the defensive side of the ball, there's been a multitude of kind of like trials and tribulations that this team has gone through. Do you think with what they've gone through this year on and off the field, even going back to the offseason with, Stephon Diggs not reporting that first day and the stories and everything kind of starting from there, even maybe potentially going back further in the offseason when they lost to the Bengals and little grumblings coming out about Diggs and Allen and those pieces, it seems like from entire offseason through now, there's been a lot of hurdles and challenges for this team. And again, like with all the trials and tribulations this team has gone through, do you think they're potentially a more dangerous team for opponents down the stretch than they were in past years? Maybe there's a little more like baptism by fire type of thing with this 2023 Bills team.
Yeah, I think it's tough to say that they're a better team without, let's say, Matt Milano, a Tre'Davious White, a fully healthy Micah Hyde, Daquan Jones on the mend, Jordan Phillips now missing. So it's tough to say that they're a better team, but more battle tested and perhaps better served to have gone through that adversity and potentially come out the other side. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that, but that remains to be seen if they're able to wrap up these last 3 wins, which it seems like they're going to need all 3 of to advance to the postseason. I know that 2-1, they still have a chance, but it really is seeming more and more that they're going to need all 3 of those wins. But without those players, it's tough to say that they're better. But guys like Tyrell Dodson, Christian Benford has taken another step, and they've also added firepower with the trade for Rasul Douglas, which I don't think would have happened without the injury to Tre'Davious White. So yeah, there's been some positive to come along the way with all the trials and tribulations, as you said, and the roller coaster ride that's been this season. But I think it's all gonna to prove itself over the next few weeks. And if they are to advance to the tournament with all that battle-tested nature that they've developed over the course of the past several months, and even dating back to last season with all the adversity that they faced, yeah, I think there is something to be said for that. And I think when it comes down to championship winning season, the teams that have gone through that and, like I said, come out the other side are typically the ones that we see hoisting the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year.
I really like foolishly forgot everything that happened towards the back end of like 2022. And if you put it like into perspective, like the DeMar Hamlin pieces, even everything with like the weather and the change in travel schedule and playing the, the double games in Detroit and all of these things, like I don't like, man, that's just so much from like a calendar year perspective. That's so much for a team to go through. And I love the battle tested element. Like, and that's kind of what I was hoping, you'd kind of go to there. Like, cause there's no way you're a better team with the injuries that you've, accrued and who's off the field. But there is something to be said for that kind of resolve element and that battle tested piece. And again, as this team moves towards the playoffs, potentially, it's such an interesting juxtaposition knowing that, from an on the field roster standpoint, you're not a better team, but from, I don't know, like a confidence or emotional standpoint or battle tested element, you potentially are. And how does that kind of, tip the scales potentially in your favor or balance things out?
Yeah, going back to that galvanizing conversation we had regarding the Sean McDermott situation, we've seen this team year after year grasp onto any sort of criticism or slight and use it as motivation. And this year, they were entering this year that they were supposed to be one of the top teams in the league, and to crash and burn the way that they have, I think they needed something to hold on to. And perhaps going back to that conversation, maybe that was the turning point they needed. And now all systems go for the Bills moving forward.
Yeah, any little piece to kind of hang their hat on as far as motivation and us against the world mentality, which we know Sean McDermott, the team, kind of loves to kind of champion and bang the drum for. You mentioned a couple players a minute ago in terms of, Terrell Dotson, Christian Benford, guys that, have stepped up and played well in their roles this year. Is there a particular player for you? It could be multiple if you have them, but, any particular player or players for you that have exceeded your expectations this year? Or is there somebody that stands head and shoulders above the rest? Like who for you has kind of exceeded your expectations this year for this team?
Yeah, Spencer Brown at right tackle.
Oh.
I think his improvement along the offensive line has really helped that unit as a whole. Bringing in Connor McGovern has certainly helped. Deion Dawkins having perhaps his best season as a pro. Mitch Morris as solid as ever on the inside as well. So a lot has gone right for this unit, but I think it's really all started with Spencer Brown taking a huge step forward and really helping eliminate some of the top pass rushers in the league this season. You saw him earlier this season do a great job against Max Crosby with a little bit of help from scheming from Ken Dorsey. And then this past week, I thought he did a great job against Micah Parsons. And I haven't really dove into what Joe Brady may have done to help him out in that situation, but I'm expecting a little bit of the same. But yeah, Spencer Brown has done a phenomenal job this season in his step forward, protecting Josh Allen and really limiting that pressure from his side and just bringing confidence to that position moving forward into the future, not going into the offseason now thinking that, are we going to have to draft a player to fill that position? Are we going to have to look on the free agent market? He's really solidified that position this year, and I think moving into the future.
The offensive line has been such a nice positive this year as a whole. Like in the addition of Connor McGovern, the drafting of Osiris Torrance, and then like Spencer Brown reducing. For me, he was always such a roller coaster of a player, and like he would have these awesome like high highs, but these disastrously low lows. And he's started to even out a little bit, and he's reduced the frequency of those low lows. And when you get that consistency at that position, a premier position, the bookend opposite of Deion Dawkins, that goes such a long way. But then the addition of Torrance, and he and Torrance have played well together. They've had some issues at times, with two-man games and things in spurts. But yeah, this offensive line has really been overall such an improved unit, especially in pass protection. But, in the run game as well, especially coming off the heels of a dominating run performance against the Cowboys. Like it's a really interesting mix of athleticism and physicality and what they've been able to lean into. So it's a great pick with Spencer Brown. And yeah, I think it also highlights just, again, how well this offensive line has done this year and the difference that it's made. Last question for you, Alex, and then we'll get you out of here so you can go back and enjoy the Sabres.
I think you might put on a Hallmark Christmas movie or something.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice. I like that. Going forward, we've talked about some positives and the galvanization aspect of this team, battle-tested pieces, but there are some warts for this team. If you're looking at the Bills, what concerns you the most in regards to this team potentially holding them back from making the run in the playoffs, or maybe even getting to the playoffs? Just what what's in your brain? It could be one thing, could be multiple. What concerns you the most, though, in terms of holding this team back?
Yeah, the defense, specifically the run defense, with Daquan Jones still not back from injury, and now Jordan Phillips being lost on that interior defensive line. I know he's not a stout run stuffer as much as a Daquan Jones or a Linval Joseph, but to lose more firepower inside, certainly not a good sign. And the Bills have done well defensively over the past couple of games, and give credit to Sean McDermott to really settle things in there, and especially in the second half, doing a great job against the Chiefs, letting that first drive of the second half go right down the field for a touchdown. But since then, they've really done a phenomenal job, and give McDermott a lot of credit for that. But yeah, with all the injuries they still face on defense, and really mounting with Phillips going out, Hyde and Epineza trying to work their way back this week. And you saw their injury report looking more like a grocery list this afternoon. So certainly on the defensive side, that's where my concern lies. But over the past couple of games, they've shown no signs of letting up. So positive moving forward, but there is a lingering concern there on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think they've performed admirably, especially in spurts, like considering when Daquan Jones went out, I felt like he was playing at an all-pro level. Matt Milano was already an all-pro. Trey White, I think, was starting to round back into that form, another year removed from that ACL injury. And you lose three tremendous players at each level of the defense. And then you add in on top of that, Greg Rousseau playing banged up through a majority of the year, and the injuries, that Hyde has had, and just what you've had kind of at those positions, again, at all three levels of the defense. And they performed admirably, but I'm always just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop a little bit, even when there are these good performances. But I'm also super paranoid and kind of pessimistic. So that might just be me. Alex, I appreciate you taking the time and joining me and kind of, giving a pulse check on this team with your insight and your access. Appreciate the hell out of you. For those of you, watching, listening, who don't know Alex, the floor is yours. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, where they can find your work, anything and everything. The floor is yours.
Yeah, just follow me at Alex Brasky. You can log on to thedailynewsonline.com. That's where my weekly coverage for the Bills resides. It's the Batavia Daily News website. Also, Bills Digest coming out at the end of the season, or if the Bills are to advance to the playoffs, we'll have preview editions available digitally. So a lot going on this time of year, and really hoping that this team can advance to the second season. Boy, that would be exciting, because they're looking like one of the hottest teams in football. Is my automatic light here in the office keeps shutting off. I guess it's my cue.
I was gonna say, I hope that's not like an ominous foreshadowing. You're like, yeah, they're looking really good, and then the lights go off. That made my heart sink.
My desk in the office is around a corner, and the sensor for the automatic light is around that corner. So I'll be sitting here, and you have to jog around for it to move. So
if things fall apart, I'm extremely superstitious. So if anything goes wrong, in the back of my mind, I'm going to be like, the light in Alex's office, it knew, it just sensed what was going to go happen.
The light has gone out on the Bills season.
Man, and that would just, oh my God, it'd be so fortuitous, but in a bad way. Alex, again, I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for your insight. Go enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and I'll see you in the Twitterverse.
Thanks for having me. Talk soon.
Have a good one. Tremendous guest, Mr. Alex Brasky, again, sports editor, Batavia Daily News, and editor of Bills Digest. I always enjoy chopping it up with Alex. We had him on, I think myself and Eric had him on in the film room earlier this offseason. Just a good dude, kind of doesn't pull any punches, just real straightforward with anything and everything to do with the Buffalo Bills. So he's an awesome follow. Give him a follow on Twitter, again, at Alex Brasky. Awesome. Now let's pivot the conversation. Like I mentioned in the intro, for those who didn't see the intro or joined a little late, a little bit of a pivot in this week's episode, a little bit of peek behind the curtain. I had some Chargers guests lined up, but with all the chaos of the Chargers situation from an organization standpoint, some things went a little haywire from a scheduling perspective. So pivoted a little bit, brought Alex in the first half of the episode to, again, give that pulse check on the Bills, which I thought was really insightful, especially considering just all the chaos this team has been through this year. If they do go on to win a Super Bowl potentially, man, the 30 for 30 on this team, not just this season, but like Alex and I talked about, even going back to, 2022 and the DeMar Hamlin pieces and the snowstorm and just then how the season ended and tying it all together. You could probably lump 13 seconds into that somehow in some way. Like there's just a multitude of trial and tribulation stories that make for a great like Super Bowl documentary or 30 for 30 on a team. And it's been a wild ride just solely focusing on the 2023 season, whether you're including the off season, whether you're focusing just on the regular season. So it was awesome to bring somebody of his work and his line of work into the show to kind of give that pulse check as we enter a very important time heading into week 16 against the Chargers, but really continuing this playoff push for the Bills. And it's one that, like Alex said, is every you can get in potentially if they go 2-1 down the stretch, but every single win counts. You need it, especially if Miami falters a little bit. Then it sets up that week 18 battle for the AFC East division title in Miami. I would imagine that game probably gets flexed to a Sunday night. But so that little peek behind the curtain, pivoted a little bit. Awesome of Alex to kind of jump in and give us that insight in the beginning of the episode. And now this back half, we'll get our regular, inside matchup piece between the Bills and the Los Angeles Chargers, like we normally do in the front half of the episode, metrics and pieces and film study aspect and all of that. Want to grab a couple of the comments that I saw coming through. Comment here from Sean saying, really hope they're able to hold on to Brady for next year. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. My biggest thing with Joe Brady is I'm wondering, and I had the same concern with Ken Dorsey because the Bills offense started out good last year, and the whole piece was, and again, myself and Eric said it on the film room multiple times, what happens when opponents start to kind of get that sample size of who and what you are on tape. And so, what we're seeing from Joe Brady, is it a honeymoon phase or is it, kind of built to go a little longer? And if it is the honeymoon phase, when does the other shoe drop a little bit? Because with Dorsey in his first year last year, we saw how things started out, and then you saw things start to get a little more tough or a little tougher as you got through the rest of the fall and into the winter. But now, if the other shoe drops, it's more severe because if the other shoe drops and people start to figure out a little bit, it's the wild card round or the divisional round, and then it's a one and done. Kind of what does that look like? How does that springboard Brady into the potential offensive coordinator position permanently going into next year? Yeah, I'm interested in kind of his character arc and personal trajectory going forward for this team. Royce says, so far, so good with Brady, hoping over the long haul it stays that way. I like this comment here from Steve. Steve saying special teams needs an energy boost. Martin is not punting well, blocked field goal, should have had a punt blocked, 12 men on the field, and untimely returns. They make me nervous. This is an underrated comment from Steve. Usually year in and year out, the Buffalo Bills are one of the better special teams in the entire NFL. We know Sean McDermott values all three phases. We know special teams plays a pivotal role. There's a reason that, Saran Neal and Tyler Matakevich and those guys like continuously get roster spots. Tywan Jones in years past, like he believes in, curating special teams as an actual unit. And yeah, they've been a little bit lackluster in some kick return coverage, some punt return coverage pieces. Sam Martin has been, inconsistent. As you mentioned here, we've had the blocked field goals, the 12 men on the field. Yeah, it's been inconsistent and sloppy on that special team side of the ball. And I worry for things like that because, again, sometimes kind of huge snafu in that phase of the game can be the difference between you winning a big game or losing a big game. A kick return here, a shank punt here, a blocked field goal here, poor kick coverage or punt coverage here. Look at the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles. That Kadarius Toney punt return is one of, again, there were a couple, but that went a very long way towards securing that game for the Kansas City Chiefs and allowing them to win their second Super Bowl in the Mahomes-Reed era. So, special teams absolutely 1,000% matter. This is an underrated comment here from Steve. I like it. I like Pete confessing that he was an anonymous source. I like that. I like this from John at Discontinued Foods. He gives the plot twist, and he says the main anonymous source was the WWE's higher power. It was me, McDermott. It was me all along. Nice Vince McMahon reference. That was one of the most disappointing culminations to a storyline I've ever experienced in wrestling. Like that whole higher power thing and the Undertaker storyline in Austin and all of it and how it wove together. You had some great moments, and for it all to be like Vince McMahon at the end, like I was extremely disappointed. What else? Oh, Pete, following up on Alex's comment on Spencer Brown. Pete saying Brown even had a rough September. His turnaround has been otherworldly. Yeah, I think he's had a good year. I don't think I know what the metrics say, And again, he's gotten help. Even Alex mentioned that as well. I like the season that he's having. I think he has reduced the amount of lows on that roller coaster that he's been. And you're still seeing the plus athleticism. You're still seeing what he can do in the run game, his ability to pull. And again, his athleticism has been extremely helpful towards one of their most successful run concepts, which they ran like a million times against the Cowboys this past week. That dart concept, that tackle wrap, tackle pull concept, what you can do with Dawkins and Spencer Brown, because of their ability to work out in space and get on the move. I think Brown has been integral towards the success of the run game, and I think his pass pro has improved. I still think there are concerns for him, but again, he's still raw. He's still kind of behind schedule given. We've said it a million times, the 8-on-8 football or whatever in high school, and then playing for Northern Iowa, and then opting out for the COVID year, and then the injuries that he's had, all of these things that have kind of stunted his growth and trajectory and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think he's been a positive and a plus. I don't think he's been a world beater as some are making him out to be, but again, I think he's added consistency to his game, and the offensive line as a whole has been a real joy to watch, especially somebody who is a fan of running the ball like I still am. I love what this offensive line has done this year. Like the comment from Roy talking about the O-line, saying they've improved in pass pro, but definitely more room for growth there. Yeah, I think you can say that. And I think there is room for growth naturally on that arc. Cyrus Torrance is a rookie. Spencer Brown will continue to grow, should continue to develop. I think the big question is what happens with Mitch Morse going forward. Like, he looks older, but he's really not, still like in his early, actually, I always forget what his actual age is. I want to say it's like 30, but oh yeah, he's 31. He'll be 32 this upcoming April. I love Mitch Morse. So we'll see what he means for that center position. The addition of Connor McGovern, again, solid. Like, this offensive line is just solid. Like, there really aren't holes, there aren't vulnerabilities or deficiencies. I was going to say something else about them, but I don't want to jinx them, so I'm not going to say that at all. But yeah, they've been a nice turnaround. Oh, love this comment from John saying Alex is absolutely one of my favorite Bills-related follows on Twitter. Great insight and commentary. Yeah, I was pumped. Message Alex, he was able to do the show. Love the insight. Pete saying 13 seconds would be the beginning of any 30 for 30 on this team. Oh, absolutely. Like, the intro would be like a voiceover or a narrator talking, and then you would hear like the radio play-by-play or like the Jim Nantz call on CBS being like, touchdown to Davis, blah, blah, blah. And then they'd cut in like, oh, the Chiefs only have 13 seconds. And they'd splice in like Allen and everybody hugging on the sidelines, making you think like, oh man, the Bills are going to win it. Oh, brutal. Roy says, I'm not ready for Super Bowl talk. We have to get to the playoffs first. That's fair. This is a good one from Pete saying Miami isn't beating both Dallas and Baltimore. I'd like to think that they're not. I'm really hoping Dallas wants to rebound in a big way and wants to make a statement going into Miami this week. The only thing that I think potentially hurts Baltimore is they play San Francisco this week, Monday night, and then they're on a short week going, again, they're at home, but then playing against Miami, they're banged up a little bit on defense. Marcus Williams hurt his groin again this past week. Kyle Hamilton isn't 100%. I don't expect them to beat both Dallas and Baltimore, but if they did beat them both, I wouldn't be 100% surprised. Their O-line, Baltimore's O-line is banged up again. Like, we know Dallas can be beat, especially away from Dallas. I do think they match up better with Miami than they do the Bills. But the Tyreek Hill piece is a huge wild card, but Baltimore's banged up on both sides of the ball. If Baltimore's healthy, and I guess you could really say this about any team, but Baltimore year in and year out, I'm continuing to say it, if Baltimore's healthy, like, they are one of the best teams in football and like a Super Bowl favorite year in and year out. The problem is they just get hurt like every single year to start the season in terms of quantity and quality, and you never really get to see their full potential come to fruition. And they're starting to get a little bit with that now, like, as they've been largely healthy for the year. Keaton Mitchell tore his ACL last week or on Sunday against the Jags. So I don't think Miami's beating both Dallas and Baltimore, but I don't think it would be unheard of if they did, especially with how Baltimore's starting to pick up these injuries and all these pieces. Oh, good comment from Pete saying, yeah, special teams has been awful. Multiple things every week. We still have guys running on late for field goals. What else? Roy saying, would you say special teams is the weak link of all three phases? Maybe, potentially. If you're just talking about overall play, yeah, like compared to sample size and everything, I still do have worries about the defense, just wondering kind of when the depth and talent piece is going to kind of rear its ugly head a little bit. But what's interesting or I maybe potentially helpful, but also annoying, the AFC this year is like you don't know who the best team in the AFC is. Like I would still, if I had to hang my head on somebody, I would hang my head on Kansas City because I think their defense is really good. I believe in Steve Spagnuolo and I believe in Andy Mahomes. I believe in Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, but I really like what Baltimore can do. I'm not as big a believer into Miami, but if they're healthy and with what McDaniel does, like you can make a case for Miami, you can make a case for Kansas City, you can make a case for Baltimore, you can make a case for the Bills. Like and that's I think what also makes this season annoying. Like, of course, the season where the Bills are faltering a little bit and have injuries and all of these pieces. Of course, it's the year where the AFC looks like wide open, and it can be anybody's year coming out of the AFC. Of course, that's the year with all this parity and Kansas City having 5 losses and faltering and all the injuries that all these teams have had. Of course, the Bills have, become susceptible to that. And they also have injuries and have had inconsistent play. So annoying. I know that I don't even know how I got to this point from Roy's question here, but oh yeah, that's my question. As you start to go forward in the playoffs, these teams that you are going to play, I do worry about the defense a little bit. Going up against the Baltimore, I'm very interested to see what happens with the Bills defense against Miami in Week 18. Like if that game matters, and how Miami comes out, the game plan earlier in the year, and I said this on Twitter. The game plan earlier in the year against Miami when the Bills won in Buffalo defensively was beautiful. After Miami scored their 14, I think roughly started the second quarter, you really started to see a marriage and a merging of the pass rush plan and the coverage aspect on the back end, similar to what we saw in this game against Dallas. The performance against Dallas and the performance against Miami are the two best defensive performances from the Bills defense all year, considering what they did from a game plan and execution standpoint, also putting into perspective like the caliber of opponent that they faced. So what you saw in that Miami game, again, just a beautiful marriage of coverage and what was going on in the front and the back end, pass rush coverage, the marriage of all of it, the game plan. But also within that, you had this fully healthy squad. You had Daquan Jones, you had Matt Milano, you had Trey White for the majority of the game. This team is a much different team from a defensive perspective now than they were then. I worry about how they hang with the big boys from a defensive standpoint. That Eagles game and that Eagles performance is still fresh in my mind. It was just, several weeks ago. I would like to believe that coming out of the bye, they course corrected and changed things. I'm a big believer in good teams, Super Bowl caliber teams, playoff caliber teams, Super Bowl contenders. They use that bye week as a real opportunity to self-scout, course correct, and alter their path and their trajectory for the season. The Lions did it last year. I don't have the numbers offhand, but if you look at who and what the Lions were from a statistical and metric standpoint, even from a tape standpoint as well, although it's harder to decipher unless you know what you're looking for, the Lions came out of the bye week gunning, and that's the reason they had that strong run to end the season. They used that bye week to self-scout, course correct. The Bills are a good team at that usually, and I would really like to believe that they figured some things out defensively coming out of that bye week. And what we've seen from the defense against Kansas City and against Dallas is what we'll continue to see going forward. But that weak link conversation, it probably is special teams overall. But like Alex said, I do worry about the defense a little bit. I believe in Sean McDermott as a defensive coordinator, and I believe in the players they have. But man, it's just a little worrisome to think, like, can they continue to do this with the injuries that they've had? Can they continue to patch together? Can they continue to expect guys to step up and play at this level like they've had? Like, is it sustainable? How sustainable is it? That's a bit of concern for me. But again, I'm paranoid and kind of pessimistic and overly objective at times to a fault. So we'll see with that piece. Question here from Jay. I like all these questions. We'll do a lot of questions and things from the live chat before we get into the matchup pieces. Question here from Jay saying, any chance Josh starts to throw it all over the yard, turnover free, like we've seen him do in 2021, now that he feels like it's not all on his shoulders? Potentially. I personally hope not. I love high variance Josh Allen, and I've talked about on the show a bunch, the whole yin and yang of Josh Allen, like the thing that makes him throw stupid throws into nonsense coverages and turn the ball over is the same thing that makes him run over a linebacker and run through a dude's face. Like that aspect of his game is awesome. That unicorn alien nature, the high variance plays, it's awesome. I think there's a chance you could see that based on matchup, but I I want to see I don't want to see him I don't want to see the yin and yang of Josh Allen kind of go through his arm. I want to see it more through the runs, through him scrambling and design runs. I think, and again, it's not me just saying it coming on the heels of that Cowboys game. I think the Bills have something real with this run game. And I'm not saying they should become a run first team, but they have an opportunity to just kind of press a bunch of easy buttons with this run game for the offense and then allow that run game to kind of jumpstart and funnel through and flow with Josh. So I want to see this establish the run aspect of the offense flowing into the RPO game and the play action game and have that kind of just provide easy buttons for Josh Allen left and right where we don't need to see him throw it all over the yard because the run game's working and let's run an RPO and Diggs is wide open on a glance, or the run game's working and we go play action and Gabe Davis is wide open on an over. Like those pieces, I want to see that those easy buttons continue to be present and continue to be pushed and pressed. But I definitely think there is a chance. Like if the run game's struggling and things aren't working, I could see a point where it's just like, all right, cool, let's put the ball in one of the best players in the NFL's hands. I don't know how to word that properly. Let's put it into Allen's hands and see what he can do. So I think it's possible, but given the success that the run game has had and how this O-line is built, I think you'll see more of this direct controlled type of offense, which can also lead to explosives and put up 30 points in the blink of an eye. Oh, question from Paul. If you were Dallas, how would you have adjusted to the Bills? So that's actually a really good question. I was very surprised at two things from Dallas. Offensively, I was surprised they didn't stick to the ground more or use more of the run game. They were successful on the ground in this game. I put a tweet on it yesterday, but their success numbers, their success rate on the ground was actually really good against the Bills this past week. Their overall EPA per play and their passing numbers were not so much, but they were successful on the ground. And with what the Bills were trying to do from a take away the middle of the field and seam perspective with coverage, from a man coverage standpoint, from a too high shell structure standpoint, disguising looks and all that kind of stuff, I thought it kind of just made sense for the Cowboys to pivot more towards the run game. Even when Zach Martin went down, I just kept waiting for them to get the ground game more involved. Tony Pollard had burst, he had juice. I was expecting more of a commitment to the game. So offensively, I would have adjusted by going more towards the ground game. Like the Bills went into that game wanting to take away CeeDee Lamb and wanting to disrupt the timing for Dak. And once that happened and started actually coming to fruition, I'm surprised they didn't pivot more to that run game a little bit. Defensively, it was always going to be tough for Dallas in this game. We talked about it last week on the show. Their natural way of operating on defense is a nickel or dime based defense. And so you have a nickel or dime based defense, meaning you have more DBs on the field. And on top of that, Marcus Bell, number 14, one of their starting linebackers, is 205 pounds. And then you also have Damone Clark, number 33. I think he's like 230, high 220s, low 230s, which is fine, but still on the smaller-ish side for a linebacker, especially knowing that that's your bigger thumper type of linebacker when pairing him with Bell. How they like to play, I'm surprised teams don't run on him more. When I had JP Acosta on last week, he had the great point of Philly started to establish that run against Dallas and use their run game to kind of pound Dallas a little bit. But the problem was they just turned the ball over and then Dallas scored and it kind of took them out of that run game. The game script kind of worked against them in that way. So I always thought it was going to be tougher for Dallas to deal with the Bills offense if the Bills offense could run. That being said, Dallas just didn't adjust to the Bills' dart run concept. I talk about it all this time on the show. I've showed it on this show. Eric and I talk about it on the film all the time. I talk about it on Twitter. It's just that basic play now where, four linemen basically down block or work kind of double teams. Then Deion Dawkins either pulls or Spencer Brown either pulls. So dart is just tackle wrap or tackle pull, depending on how you want to label it. Dallas just didn't adjust at all. Their adjustment was to, okay, instead of trying to box it or force it in, let's just make our edge guy, kind of go inside and try and force it out. And then James Cook was like, all right, cool, I'm just going to bounce it for 10 yards outside. Like there was no adjustment to really the only Bills run concept. They worked in some duo and they worked in some mid zone, but they really were just spamming tackle, wrap, and dart over and over and over, similar to actually what the Bills did last year in Buffalo on the Saturday night game against Miami in the snow. They closed that game out by just leaning into that same concept against Miami. But this was just like egregious. Like Brady just kept pushing this button. And I think he said it in a presser piece. He said, like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And that's really what it was. I'm surprised Dallas didn't adjust to that from either a personnel or from a front standpoint. Again, if they did, the Bills had some answers and counters built into it, but there were just no adjustments to this core run. And that's not a surprising concept for the Bills. Like, that is a core run concept for the Bills. It was for them last year. It was this year under Ken Dorsey. It's continued to be under Joe Brady. So the fact that the Cowboys didn't have that scouted and or didn't adjust to it at the second level and with what their fronts were doing, I was very surprised with that, in addition to not, pivoting to the run game on the offensive side of the ball. Oh, Jordan says, did you get a chance to see why the Bills had Babylon Spectre in for some plays? One, Jordan, I love that you called him Babylon. I appreciate the hell out of you for it. Two, yeah, I think it was just Dallas was in heavier personnel, so the Bills matched with heavier personnel. I think it was just they wanted 3 linebackers on the field, and so they went with 3 linebackers. I think the more interesting conversation is why they went with Spectre instead of going with Dorian Williams. That's a whole nother conversation. But as far as why Spectre was on the field, I think it was just they wanted 3 linebackers, and he was the 3rd linebacker to be on the field. Steve saying the AFC has become a battle of attrition and who has the best depth. I like our chances. I don't remember this many injuries ever. Yeah, it's just, man, it's just wild. Wild, 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 wild. There's a random comment. Aiden says, Ant, what's your favorite cereal? Frosted Flakes, I think. It's tough. Frosted Flakes. Yeah, even though it's horrible for you. Good question. I love this comment here from RC3. He says 133 watching. Smash those likes. Yes, yes, yes. We actually have more now up into the 140s. Please, 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 and thank you. If you folks have not already dropped a like on this video, please do so. Whether you're watching live now or watching post live later after this has been uploaded, the likes go a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. The likes are the lifeblood of these live streams. So if you can find it in your heart, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way. Oh, no, I forgot that one. Good job, Aiden. Aiden says I was just eating some Cinnamon Toast Crunch, so I had to ask. That's my favorite cereal. I am embarrassed and angry at myself for forgetting it. Cinnamon Toast Crunch is my favorite cereal. I also, when I was a kid, Cookie Crisp was really up there, but they changed it. Back when Cookie Crisp used to be like the commercial with like the 2 robbers and they would get nabbed every time, Cookie Crisp was legit. But Cinnamon Toast Crunch is my favorite. And then all the cinnamon sugar like mixes into the milk. It's just fantastic. Yeah, cinnamon sugar all day. Yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah, Aiden. I appreciate you. That's what I was trying to go through all these cereals in my head. From a healthy cereal standpoint, I like Cheerios and I like Special K, but if I have to eat cereal and not care the health aspect, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is my go-to all day, all day, all day. Oh, comment here from Ralph Wilson Sr. saying Dallas fielded a flag football defense, a bunch of lightweights in the box without a prayer. That's the way they like to play. They like to play fast. They want to get you behind the sticks, rely on that pass rush. And again, I think also part of what hurt them, not having Jonathan Hankins at defensive tackle, I'm not saying he's, a Daquan Jones clone or replica, but he is their Daquan Jones. So Hankins getting hurt the week before against Philly, I think it was against Philly. It was a game that I was watching. I'm pretty sure it was the Philly game. Hankins not being in there went a long way towards them not being able to defend the run with their light boxes and, also lighter personnel. So that hurt them as well. But yeah, that's how they like to play. They like to, and honestly, it works a bunch, to their credit. Having Malik Hooker not being in the game as well also hurt them. But when they are healthy, granted, you could say this about a bunch of teams, but them specifically, when they are healthy and they have Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson and Jaron Kearse and these safeties that can mix in with Clark and Bell, it becomes this really interesting mix of, okay, what coverage are they playing? Is it man or is it zone? It's probably going to be man, but who's manning up? Is anybody blitzing? Is it too high? Is it single? Like all of these games that they can play because they have these hybrid defenders in the back 7 allows them to do some really creative things and some fun things. But if you get up against a team who can just play smash mouth football and run it down your throat, to your point, you're going to be in trouble because those hybrid defenders are still on the lighter side of things. And you can play fast all day, but when you're playing fast, if you're not playing fast and accurate within your gap integrity, you're done. And that's what happened. But I like that. Question here from Sam. We're actually going to get into this in a little bit, but Sam says, saw Keenan Allen on the injury report. Is he going to play? He's got a heel injury. Didn't practice today at all. We're going to talk about it, but that's a huge potential missing piece for the Chargers. Another comment here from Jay saying, does our lack of perceived wide receiver depth make it even more of a reason to lean into the run game in order to get easy throws? I always think it makes sense to lean into the run game in order to get easy throws, even if your wide receiver depth is crazy. But also, yes, I like what Gabe Davis does, though I do recognize like the limitations of his skill set and who he is as a player. Although I do not think he's anywhere near as bad as people make him out to be. And I don't think he's as bad as the lack of targets and receptions and yards and everything have been 3 out of the 4 games under Brady. But yeah, I think that makes even more sense. Like having more depth at the tight end position and more potential mismatch opportunities with the tight ends speaks to wanting to run the ball. So you're getting into those heavier personnel groupings and knowing that you can run the ball out of those groupings or pass the ball out of those groupings, depending on what the defense chooses to do. Yeah, I just think it makes sense. I think it makes sense to lean into the run game in general. Like I said, like I am a huge proponent. I recognize the nature of today's NFL, and it's a passing league, and the majority of the rules are in favor of the offense, and they skew towards passing the football, right? Like even just in general, in terms of like you have the advanced metrics and the analytics that talk about, the advantages of passing the football and being a pass first type of team, but then even more so the rules also cater to it. But at the end of the day, still defenses and how they set themselves in terms of coverages is all dependent upon how they fit the run. So what they do from a pass perspective on the back end is still, even in a pass first league, is still dependent upon how they are able to fit the run. If you can't fit the run with 6 and 7 and you have to bring, a safety down into the box consistently, or you have to worry about your run fits in that regard and run integrity, it limits what you can do on the back end. So I am always a huge proponent of establishing the run and having a good ground game just in general, let alone going up against a lot of teams that are built to stop the pass, being a little bit lighter on the interior or lighter in the spine. If you get a bad weather game and you need to be able to run the football because passing it isn't an option. I'm a huge proponent of leaning into the run game for those pieces, but also because of what it does for the pass game, specifically with Josh Allen, with a mobile quarterback, a dual threat quarterback like Allen. It not only opens up the play action game, which yes, you don't need to have a good run game in order to have a good play action game, but it most definitely helps. But in the case of the Bills, having that good run game opens up avenues for their RPO game and potential quarterback keepers off of, kind of the modern day triple option piece where Allen can have that mesh action in the backfield with a running back. And depending on what the edge does, he can either hand it off to the running back, he can keep it himself, or he could pass out of it. That, again, 3 options, modern day triple option football. I just think that run game opens up so much for you. So given what the Bills have at receiver, I think it does make even more sense to lean into the run game in order to get easy throws, but I would be a proponent of that even if the Bills had tremendous wide receiver depth. It just adds another element that defenses have to account for, that puts them into a bind, makes them have to make tough decisions and live in a world that is not easy to live in. Jack says that the Texans win this week. We just need to win out and we are in. I'll be honest, I haven't looked at any of the playoff scenario predictors, just because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm still focused on the big one. Like Pete mentioned earlier in the comments, I think Miami loses one of their 2 games against Dallas or Baltimore, or even potentially both. And I really don't want to jinx it, but I see week 18 against Miami as being a battle for the division title. So I'm focused solely on the AFC East title. Whatever happens from a wild card standpoint, go and let God sort that out. I haven't even gone down that rabbit hole, but if you're saying that if the Texans win this week, we just need to win out and we are in, I kind of trust you based on tiebreakers and all those pieces. So that's fair. Roy saying, in my younger days, grape nuts was my go-to. I've never had grape nuts with milk. I've eaten them out of the box with my hand like a savage, but I respect them. What else? Oh, Billy says Mooney to Buffalo next year, number 2. Not after he dropped that Hail Mary against Cleveland. He had a bunch of drops in that game. I was on the Mooney bandwagon back in 2021. I had him on my fantasy team, and he did some good things for me. Man, and I know one game is not indicative of who he is, but man, after he dropped that Hail Mary, I cannot co-sign Darnell Mooney love right now, Billy, but I appreciate you for kind of banging the drum for him. Roy says, let Gabe walk, draft a wide receiver. The wide receiver class this year is absolutely loaded. I would not be opposed to drafting a wide receiver at all. Oh, Jordan, why you got to do this? Jordan says, sometimes I dream about the Bills drafting Khalil Mack and not Sammy Watkins. I really thought when they traded up, it was going to be Khalil Mack. They had the need. Rex Ryan was a defensive coach. Like everything just screamed Khalil Mack. And I know he probably didn't care about him coming from UB, but I was just like, it just all lined up. Like, oh my God, like Khalil Mack. And they took Sammy Watkins, and I wasn't disappointed because Sammy Watkins was a beast. Like there were a multitude of people that thought Sammy Watkins was going to be like a generational talent at wide receiver. And maybe if his, off the field aspect was a little more sound, he could have potentially been. So I wasn't disappointed at the Sammy pick. In hindsight, obviously we all are. But yeah, I really thought it was going to be for Khalil Mack. I really, really, really thought when they traded up, it was going to be for Khalil Mack. And I was greatly disappointed. Not too disappointed because, again, I was like, well, Sammy Watkins is still sweet. But obviously sitting here in hindsight, yeah, man, sucks. Oh, yeah, Pete says, I love Mike Evans. I've done this so much that I've forgotten. Like, they could have just sat and not traded up at all. And I think they still could have gotten Mike Evans, or they could have gotten Aaron Donald. Like, there's that draft was really great in the top, 20. I really liked Mike Evans. Like, yeah, it was man, and especially too, like they traded up for Sammy, and then knowing what like Mike Evans was behind him, Odell was behind him, even though Odell like flew too close to the sun and burned fast and burned bright. But man, like yeah, they could have just stood pat and also gotten a really great player. Man, that one really gets me every time. Oh, good times. But enough. Actually, no. More questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you folks got. Keep putting them up into the chat. I will bring them up as we go forward, starting to have this conversation about the Buffalo Bills versus Los Angeles Chargers matchup inside Week 16. For those of you playing at home, feel free to start a counter for how many times I say San Diego Chargers, because it will happen at some point. The only reason I said Los Angeles now is because I'm literally looking at the graphic, but I will forget at some point, just like I always call the Raiders Oakland instead of Vegas. It will be hard for me to forever get used to that. But like I mentioned in the intro, and we've been talking a bit through this episode and a bit with Alex, I know this Chargers team is a dumpster fire right now, especially with that loss that they had against the Raiders. Like going down at one point, I stopped watching it I paused it and then got like kind of a spoiler with it. But I mean, just at one point being down 49-0, being down 42-0 at the start of the second half, just an absolute brutal way to go out if you are Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco and that whole, crew there that's been running the Chargers for years. But, nonetheless, I'm assuming most people don't have a high view of this team or see them as a threat or see this as a game that, should threaten the Bills in any way, shape, or form. But this is still a matchup that we have to talk about. And I still think it isn't a team that should be looked past given some of the talent that they do have and what they could potentially be. But nonetheless, let's dive into this matchup for the Buffalo Bills versus the Los Angeles Chargers. So the first piece I wanted to bring up, saw this comment here from Roy saying Easton Stick. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Chargers offense first because there's some numbers from that Week 15 game that just nuts. And this is where so I look at the advanced metrics and then go and watch the tape to kind of put things into perspective or kind of be able to put the breadcrumbs together to form the big puzzle piece. Sometimes I do the opposite, right? Like sometimes I'll watch film and then go look at the metrics and the metrics confirm what I saw with my eyes. Sometimes I do the opposite, like what I did here, which is look at the advanced metrics and some of the charts and things, and then go into the film knowing what happened and then being able to diagnose it schematically. And so some numbers here for the Chargers offense in Week 15. Again, first full game under backup quarterback Easton Stick. He got some work the week before against Denver when Herbert went down. But this was his first official start for the year. So the Chargers offense in Week 15 against the Las Vegas Raiders, 31st in EPA per play at negative 0.396. So almost close to being like on an average EPA per play basis, close to losing a half point per play. Like that is just absolutely brutal. And I'm also going to give you the numbers in this game versus what they were weeks 1 through 14. So Week 15, 31st in EPA per play. Previous weeks, 17th. 19th in success rate offensively, also 19th weeks 1 through 14, 13th in passing success rate in week 15, 12th on the year prior to that, 22nd in rushing success rate in week 15, 31st weeks 1 through 14. Now, granted, to add some context to that, a bunch of this came when the game was done. Again, they were down 49-0 to start the third quarter, so there was a little bit of garbage timey aspect. Granted, the Raiders were playing their dude and still trying, but being up 49-0 in the third quarter and kind of the writing being on the wall, I think changes things a little bit. On the year, this Chargers offense as a whole is 17th in DVOA, 15th in the pass, 30th in the run. Their run game on the year, absolutely brutal, 30th in EPA per attempt. Again, like I mentioned, their run game is 30th in DVOA, and then their EPA per attempt on the year, 30th. 9th in terms of hit at the line percentage, 9th in a good way, meaning they don't have a lot of runs where their running backs are contacted at the line of scrimmage. And they're 18th in stuff percentage. Stuff percentage, again, being the amount of runs going for 0 or fewer yards. So they're kind of middle of the pack for that aspect. So not bad, not great, middle of the pack, man. But their run game hasn't been consistent. A lot of that has been due to like the injury pieces for Austin Eckler, even though he's not really a run-first running back. He's more of a scat back that can do everything. But their run game has not been good. And even with Herbert, this was supposed to be the year for the Chargers where they kind of made that jump. Kellen Moore comes in, Joe Lombardi is out. There's supposed to be no more like quick game, just being the only option, and no more just short 5 and 6 yard throws. It was supposed to be about tapping into, the arm power and the athleticism and the talent of Justin Herbert and kind of putting all of that together. And they've had injuries again. Mike Williams continues to get hurt year after year. Keenan Allen gets injuries. Their offensive line gets banged up. Austin Eckler, like these pieces that just can never seem. I just feel like they're cursed as an organization. Like every year, it just seems like they should be better than they are, and they just do not happen to be. It like the chips never fall their way, whether because of what they're doing or just the football gods hating them. So again, even if you're not looking at them if you're looking at them from a Justin Herbert complete standpoint. On the year, again, 17th in DVOA, 15th in the pass, 30th in the run, 17th in EPA per play, 19th in success rate, 12th in passing success rate, 31st in rushing success rate. So the run game has not been good. And the passing offense with Herbert, definitely, it's been all right, but nowhere near what the potential could have been or what the expectations were they're coming into this season. And when you look, yeah, great comment here from David saying Chargers be chargering. Absolutely. Chargers going to charger. That's the way it is. When you look at Easton Stick versus the Raiders in week 15. So I'm going to pull up. Let me share my screen here. I want to bring up Easton Stick's passing chart courtesy of Next Gen Stats. So here is Easton Stick's passing chart against the Raiders in week 15. And let me share my screen. Okay, boom. There we go. Courtesy of Next Gen Stats. Now, when you look at it, it's just nuts. So I'll let you kind of drink this graphic in while I read some advanced metrics. His average depth of target in this game was 5.4. So his average throw was 5.4 yards past the line of scrimmage. When he was kept clean, so a clean pocket, no pressure, his average depth of target was 4.3, and his time to throw was 2.12. So we saw a little bit of a reverting back to quick game. When they were not blitzed, when they were not pressured, we saw a lot of quick game and a lot of screens. We saw a lot of running back screens, slant flats with wide receivers, and also slant flats with the flat route being the running back out of the backfield. We saw stick, we saw sit routes, we saw checkdowns, just a lot. 40.6% of his passes against the Raiders were between 0 and 9 yards. And if you look on this chart right here, let's just count them out there together. How many passes were above 10 yards? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Only 7 of his 32 attempts came above 10 yards. And you're looking at all the chicken pox there for the green and the white. Again, white is incomplete, green is complete, but you look at everything there. And again, to go over it from a conceptual standpoint, to put it together with what you're looking at it from this chart, when you watch the film, yeah, you're just seeing a lot of quick game. All those passes in and around the line of scrimmage and behind the line of scrimmage are either checkdowns or swing passes, but they're running a lot of running back screens, which makes sense. You have Austin Eckler. You want to invite that rush, get into Eckler's hands, use your athletic offensive line to get out in space. But again, a ton of running back screens, slant flats. And slant flats literally meaning like outside receiver runs a slant, inside receiver runs a flat route, or they'll run it to the single receiver side where the receiver runs the slant, the running back runs the flat route out of the backfield. Sit routes, stick, stuff over the ball, stuff in that 5-yard range. Again, his average depth of target overall was 5.4. And when kept clean, his average depth of target was 4.3. So just absolutely wild. I love these passing charts from Next Gen because I think it really puts into perspective like what a quarterback was doing and how an offense kind of works a little bit. And again, just looking at it there, only 7 attempts above 10 yards. So when you're looking at Easton Stick and this Chargers passing offense, you're playing top down. You don't even necessarily need to keep everything in front of you. And even that one deep shot, that one deep tutty that's around the 30-yard marker on the left side, that was a blown coverage. That big touchdown to Palmer. I think that was their first touchdown of the game that made it 49-7. But yeah, you're just looking at what they are from a passing chart standpoint. Like the comment here from Roy saying, how did he get a pick 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage? So Jack Jones blitzed. Oh yeah, Amari said it right here saying Jack Jones jumped in like a missile. Jack Jones blitzed. And if you're looking at it, so where that little red interception marker is, he blitzes. And actually, Roy, if you haven't seen it, you need to go watch it and see it. Jack Jones blitzes and gets upfield, and Stick tries to throw it inside of him. Jack Jones jumps up and literally one hand snatches it out of the air, brings it down, and then houses it for a touchdown. It's one of the best. Yeah, Charles says it right now, one-handed. It's one of the best interceptions and one of the best football plays I've ever seen in my life. Like, not now, Roy, because you want to be watching disguised coverage right now. But when we're done here, or if you have another electronic device, feel free to go and watch it right now. It's one of the best interceptions and best football plays I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely nuts. But again, looking at this offense, and this is where the chart, with the film and with the numbers all puts it in. Again, I went and watched the tape against the Raiders for Easton Stick. And again, small sample size, like it's his first start of this year. Maybe there'll be something different this year, but given his arm strength, given the rest of the pieces on the offense we're going to talk about, this is what you're looking at from a passing concept standpoint. You are looking at a lot of quick game. You are looking at screens. You are looking at anything and everything that will lead to a completion around or behind the line of scrimmage. So you have to play top down. This is going to be a game that probably stresses your linebackers at the second level. Maybe you're playing a little bit more cover 3 if you are the Bills, to try and make sure you have proper run integrity, because you're not going to be threatened on the outside by their wide receivers, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So flood, the box and make life difficult for Easton Stick, make him try and push the ball downfield, stop the run game, and those pieces there. So again, that passing chart put in with the numbers, absolutely wild. Again, average depth of target of 5.4. And when he was kept clean, meaning no pressure, just like la-di-da, like kind of figuring out where he wants to go, his average depth of target was 4.3. But again, the time to throw with that was 2.12, which points to a lot of quick game. So just, man, I don't think I've ever seen I'm sure I have at some point, but an average depth of target overall of 5.4 is crazy low. I cannot remember seeing one that low at some point. Also of note for this Chargers offense in week 15 against the Raiders, they struggled significantly. Well, I should say Easton Stick struggled significantly when under pressure and when blitzed. So Easton Stick was under pressure on 11 dropbacks against the Raiders. Of those 11 dropbacks, he tried to throw the ball 7 times. So he had 7 attempts. Again, under pressure on 11 dropbacks, he was 4 of 7 for 24 yards, an average depth of target of 9.8. He was sacked 3 times. He had a pressure to sack percentage of 27.3%, which is not good. That means the percentage of sacks that resulted from the pressures that he had. So if you get pressured 4 times and you get sacked twice, you have a pressure to sack percentage of 50%. A time to throw when under pressure of 3.81 and a rating of 64. When he was getting pressured, He was holding onto the ball. He was trying to make a play. He was getting it a little bit, around the sticks or past the sticks, but not getting a ton of opportunity. You saw the little bit of, and again, some of this is understandable, right? Given how that game went and given where he is and what the weapons are like on the outside, just looking flustered when under pressured, as most QBs are. But if you can get him under pressure, you will see success for your defense. But more importantly, I think aside from the pressure, because that's still on you. You still have to execute, and under pressure doesn't mean they blitz. It just means they got pressure. You could have rushed 4 or 3 or 2 or 1 and gotten pressure. That's how he was performing when he was pressured. But the blitz numbers are also very, very interesting. So Easton Stick was blitzed on 9 dropbacks against the Raiders. Also 4 of 7, like he was when pressured. But this time he was 4 of 7 for 29 yards. This average depth of target is nuts. So again, he was blitzed on 9 dropbacks. It was 4 of 7 for 29 yards. His average depth of target when blitzed was 1.1. He was sacked 2 times, a pressure to sack percentage of 50%, a time to throw of 2.83, and a rating of 27.4. So big highlight takeaways from that game. When Easton Stick was blitzed, he was blitzed on 9 dropbacks. He had an average depth of target of 1.1 and a rating of 27. So I know the Bills are not a blitz first team, and most teams don't want to be if they don't have to. Like if you can just rush 4 and get pressure with your standard front 4 and play coverage, like that's an option that a lot of coaches and teams would like to go for. But if there was ever a game where you potentially want to kind of crank up the blitz meter a little bit, it would be in this game because those numbers are absolutely nuts. And again, the Raiders, what they did, first of all, they were really taking advantage of the Chargers protection rules. I don't watch a ton of Chargers tape. So for me to sit here and say like, normally what they do against this type of front and against this type of pressure is this, this, and this, I don't necessarily know. So I'm going off of general football knowledge and know-how in terms of what you are supposed to do normally with your rules. But I look at what they were doing and it was just, and this is a good comment here from Amari saying Charger Center is on IR now, if I remember correctly. I don't know if Lindsley is on IR. I know he's out. I don't know if he's on IR yet, but he's a huge piece of this offense. He keeps the offensive line together. He sets protections. He adjusts. What you saw in this game was there were free runners coming through. There's a blitz in my mind, particularly. I think it's a 6-man pressure. They keep Austin Eckler in to protect. So you've got the 5 offensive linemen plus Austin Eckler, and it's an overload. Like there's 4 rushers to the offense's right. There's 1 edge player to the left, and then Robert Spillane also blitzes from the middle. And it just seemed like an easy piece. Just slide to the right to pick up the 4, and they have Austin Eckler insert and pick up Robert Spillane. But for some reason, they set one of the overload players free, and I think it's like the 3-tech or the 4-eye, and he just beats his man inside and gets an immediate pressure and sack and hit on Easton Stick. And it was just like, what are you doing in setting your protection? So they were gaming up the Chargers protection, and then you just had individual execution issues. Left tackle Rashawn Slater, who I liked, real bad game, just poor hands / poor punching. He was getting beat around the arc. Like you were just seeing him kind of like throw his hands, not really setting and punching and getting control. No real pop or force or shock in his hands. No real control established. Even if he won first touch, which he necessarily didn't, but even when he would, there was no real control established. And overall, the offensive line, there was a lack of displacement created in the run game as well, while also giving up penetration. So the O-line had a rough day against the Raiders, who are not a thorough group up front. It's really just Max Crosby and almost no one else. Malcolm Kuntz had himself a day for the Raiders in that game. And actually, if I pull up the box score for that one, I think Malcolm Kuntz had, I want to say 3 sacks based off the tape, but I could be wrong. Let me pull up that box score. What did Malcolm? Malcolm Kuntz had 2 sacks. I'm sorry, and a forced fumble that resulted in a turnover. Yeah, just to watch them get gamed up and beat individually, like the offensive line did not execute well. And between Easton Stick's kind of like the mental flurries that he goes through when he gets blitzed, and seeing those numbers again, like when he was getting blitzed, he was getting pressured almost right away, which is why you see that ADOT of 1.1. But he was able to evade and escape. and try to make some plays, which is why his overall time to throw was 2.83, almost a full 3 seconds, which is a lot. But when he would evade, scramble drill wasn't working out. Guys weren't uncovering. It was just a dumpster fire anytime there was a blitz from the Raiders. Like if they picked it up, guys weren't getting open, but usually they weren't picking it up. There were problems from Easton Stick and diagnosing who to go to. It was just a mess. So again, if there was a game where the Bills were going to dial up more pressure, it would be this one. I would get into Easton Stick's face early, get into his head early, attack him, play on that front foot, come downhill. Part of the reason I want to do that as well. Oh, this is awesome. Appreciate you, Joe. Joe coming in saying you should all blitz that, I can't say that word, that MF like button. Appreciate you, Joe, stopping by. And also, if you folks haven't already, check out Joe's show that goes live every Tuesday right before mine called Under Review. Joe does a lot of good work for the brand, so we appreciate the hell out of him for that. So go check out Joe's show after the show, of course. But appreciate you, Joe. And be like Joe. If you have not already, again, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team. Appreciate you folks for that. So again, Easton Stick, horrible against the blitz, against the Raiders. The Bills, you should dial up some more blitzes because Easton Stick is bad against the blitz, but also the lack of weapons on the outside. I know we had that question earlier in terms of if Keenan Allen is going to play or not. I don't know. He's questionable right now. He's got a heel injury, did not practice today. Mike Williams is already on IR. There's a very realistic chance that the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 for the Chargers in this game are Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer, and Quentin Johnston being the rookie wide receiver from TCU. And if you liked Quentin Johnston or didn't, or you scouted him coming out of TCU, or you've never heard of him, here's a little breakdown on him. But long story short, he still has that limited route tree that he had at TCU. Everything that Quentin Johnston does, for the most part, good or bad, is based off of a vertical route tree stem. So, and when I say vertical stem, I mean routes that have breaks off of like a vertical stem. So it could be a go route where you're literally just running straight down the field, or it could be a hook where you run straight down the field, break down, and turn around. You'll get some posts, but a lot of things are goes, posts, hooks, comebacks. It's all from a very vertical route tree, and that route tree is still limited. He'll run some outs from time to time too, or maybe a drag or like a cross over the middle of the field, but a lot of those routes are, again, in a limited route tree in that vertical base stem. And he still looks like the guy. Again, I haven't watched a ton of Quentin Johnston tape this year, so if I am way out of pocket and somebody wants to, call me out, feel free, but he still looks like the same TCU wide receiver, just in a Los Angeles Chargers jersey. Now, I think some of that is to be expected. Like, I wondered what his trajectory would be in the NFL because of that limited route tree at TCU. I wonder how long it would take to refine his game and polish him up a little bit. I thought playing with somebody like Keenan Allen, who's one of the best wide receivers in football, maybe that would potentially speed up his development and his trajectory. But you still have that limited route tree. And then you have Josh Palmer, who give you some of that vertical option from time to time, but is more suited to be a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. So having those guys in terms of being your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, I don't find it threatening. I think Rasul Douglas matches up very well with Quentin Johnston. I even think Benford does as well if he gets physical and gets in his kitchen like he did against Brandon Cooks on multiple reps against Dallas. Johnson can fly. He's got really good long speed, vertical speed, like low 4.4s. I don't think he ran the 40, or maybe he did run the 40. I think it was like 4.47, a bit underwhelming, or low 4.5s. Now I got to go and look it up. Quentin Johnston 40 time. I thought it was underwhelming. Oh, that's right. Yeah, he ran a 4.52. He plays faster than a 4.52, but official time, 40 time for Quentin Johnston is a 4.52 back during this past offseason. I think the Bills corners, again, Benford and Douglas, who are playing well, I think they match up well with Palmer and Johnston. I'm not feeling threatened by them. I'm not feeling too threatened by Everett at tight end. Eckler is their best weapon. You'll see what he's doing out of the backfield in terms of just he's legitimate. Austin Eckler is awesome. Like, I think he's one of the best running backs in the NFL, but his value is really going to come into if Easton Stick can find him, if he has time to get to him. The biggest thing I'm worried about with this offense is their screen game overall. The Bills have been susceptible to screens throughout the entirety of the year. Like multiple teams have gotten them with screens, smoke screens, quick screens, but really it's those running back screens that'll get you. So the Chargers are a prime candidate for that, unless they're gouging the Bills with quick screens. And that's where the blitzing can kind of bite you in the ass a little bit. Like if you send the house and they call the screen and they time it right and get it into Eckler's hands, like he can get a good chunk play. He can house one in the blink of an eye. Like he's good at setting things up in space. He's good at reading his blockers and using his blockers and, creating vulnerabilities in the defense as an overall ball carrier and pass catcher, but especially in the screen game. So I worry about that a little bit if you are going to blitz them. But yeah, this offense is banged up. They're wounded. They're not playing great. Again, even in the run game, lack of displacement in the run game while also giving up penetration. They were losing schematically, losing individually. I think there is something potentially to be said for, maybe they play a bit better at home. Maybe they play a bit better coming off of the firings of their head coach and GM. Maybe there is some uptick in performance or a kind of kick in the butt to kind of get everybody on the same page or a little more sense of urgency. Also, just with how bad they played against the Raiders, like that was awful. Being down 49-0 to start the third quarter, being down 42-0 to end a half, like to end the first half, that is absolutely brutal. Like I don't expect to see that bad of a Chargers team again. But that being said, they are wounded. They are reeling. They do have some deficiencies that can be exposed on that offensive side of the ball and the defensive side, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But that game plan, I'm watching out for the screen. I'm keying on Austin Eckler and not letting him beat us. That's the only way you lose this game. Don't let Austin Eckler beat you in the run or in the pass. Don't let him beat you in the route distribution. Don't let him beat you in the screen game. Heat up Easton Stick. If you can do it with 4, amazing. But I'm sending the house. I am blitzing him regularly. I'm throwing simulateds and creepers his way. I am testing their protection rules. I'm sending 5 and 6 man pressures. And then when I am, maybe I'll play some 3-3 behind it, do some fire zone stuff. But really, I got no problem sending cover 1 blitzes at them and playing man coverage on their weapons on the outside because I don't think they can regularly separate and beat Benford and Douglas. I think the Bills defense matches up well with the Chargers offense, especially without, and really, again, a lot of this is injury based. Like it's just no disrespect to who they have, but Herbert, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen would change the face of any offense in the NFL. All 3 of those dudes are out. So anybody's going to be, significantly, worse off when you have all 3 of the guys of that caliber at those positions on top of it. Like not only are they great players, but they play priority premium positions. The only wild card really is, what does the change in coach kind of mean from an on-field perspective? So we'll see. But again, just Chargers going to Charger, and it's happening offensively. Really brutal for them. Now we're going to switch the conversation to the defensive side of the ball. Before I do that, want to show some love for the sponsor. Mentioned in the beginning of the episode, One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they are the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Tremendous sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni. They also have a pizza that they named after Cover One. It is called the Cover One Allen Goat. It is amazing. I don't even want to say what the ingredients are. I just got it over the weekend. Actually, I got it Sunday for the Bills game. It was delicious. They make their own homemade blue cheese, which is amazing. They started getting into the breakfast pizza world. Now they're also starting to do some catering things. Like they're absolutely phenomenal in every way, shape, and form. Their online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. They just finished up their Toys for Tots drive. That's another thing I love about them. They're very community focused and city focused in terms of giving back and trying to help. So go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You will not be disappointed. Let's go back to that conversation inside a Week 16 Buffalo Bills versus Los Angeles Chargers. Let me take a drink of water. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. So Chargers defense, this is the one that's always gotten me under Brandon Staley. I truly believed in Brandon Staley coming out of him being defensive coordinator for the Rams. I didn't think it was just like, oh, well, he had Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald and all these other guys that like help make things work. Like I believed in the tight front and what they were doing schematically and him coming from the Fangio tree and what he did and all these pieces. And, that first year was rough under Staley, but he didn't have his pieces. And year one was like marred by the supposed lack of pieces needed to run Staley's scheme. And it was just like, well, he inherited this roster once he's able to kind of get his fingerprints on this roster a little bit more. It'll be able to take shape. He'll be able to play his scheme and system. But with each subsequent year, the defense just continued to be leaky and fail in execution. They've also had a ton of poor injury luck on the defensive side of the ball. Bosa gets hurt what seems like every year. Derwin James gets hurt what seems like every single year. Like, they can't stay healthy. They signed J.C. Jackson. He gets hurt. He wasn't playing good even when he was healthy. Like, all these things just have not seemed to work out in the Staley tenure. Again, he is now gone, but the point still stands. Like, this defense just has not clicked, and they have good players, and they've tried to reinforce that side of the ball, and it just has not worked out. And looking at this defense, what they did in week 15 against the Raiders versus what they did weeks 1 through 14. So week 15, 29th in EPA per play on the year, 25th in EPA per play, 26th in success rate against the Raiders in week 15, 29th in success rate on the year. So their defensive performance against the Raiders was actually better in terms of success rate, in terms of ranking, than what they are on the year. 28th in passing success rate against the Raiders, 27th on the year, 21st in rushing success rate against the Raiders, 21st on the year. Again, granted, a bunch of these numbers are influenced by the garbage time and when the game was kind of done, when they were down already. On the year, Chargers defense, 28th in DVOA, 28th versus the pass, 25th versus the run. Their pass defense is 27th in EPA per play. They're one of only 7 teams that are giving up a positive average for EPA per play for opposing offenses. Their run defense, 24th in EPA per attempt, but they're 10th in stuff percentage in a good way. Just, again, the pieces that they brought in not fitting. They continue to be poor schematically and from an execution standpoint. And this was the big conversation that I think came from that presser from Brandon Staley towards the end or middle of November. What loss was it? Well, maybe the Packers loss or the week before the Packers loss, something like that. But the question was kind of posed to him, like, what's going wrong? And he just kind of denied everything. Like, it's not a player issue. It's not a schematic, or not that it's not a player issue. It's not a schematic issue. It's not a play calling issue. It's not a sequencing issue. It's not this. It's not that. It's like all just execution and like this guy messing up or this happening wrong here and things not working out. And honestly, right, he may have a point. Like, their execution, especially from a run fit standpoint and a gap integrity standpoint, has really not been there. They blow coverages. The communication is not there on the back end. You've got guys that you've got safeties who seem like they're running cover 4 and corners who seem like they're running cover 2, and they expect help over the top that they're not getting. There just seems to be a disconnect continuously for this defense or in the Brandon Staley era, despite, you know, the reinforcements that they brought in and the additions that they made. Now, again, Brandon Staley is out. We'll see what happens for this defense, but I would expect a similar disconnect, or maybe the opposite. Maybe they rally the troops and it's a bit of a kick in the pants with Staley getting fired and the changes being made and the defense finally realizes their potential, but they've got holes on that side of the ball. They do have some good guys as well. Again, Tuli Tuipulotu, who they drafted out of USC, has flashed at times this year, but they've needed to rely on him more now that Joey Bosa is on IR. Tuipulotu was a nice like third piece at the edge opposite of, Mac and Bosa, but with Bosa going down, he's been thrust into a starting role. Eric Kendricks has been a fine addition, but Kenneth Murray is still up and down. And then in the secondary, Derwin James is still awesome, but he plays everywhere, and he plays everywhere to a point that almost makes you question if it's to his overall detriment. I think it's awesome that he can play everywhere, but also, like, should he? And like, maybe that's a problem a little bit. He wears so many hats. I looked up his snaps by position this year. 48 defensive line snaps, 259 snaps in the box, 182 snaps as the slot defender or apex defender, 16 snaps as outside corner, and 329 snaps as deep field safety. So he's playing everywhere. And part of that is his versatility, like what you can use him for. Like, you can use him to try to erase a tight end or help down against the run or play deep. Like, he can do so many things. But also part of that is the Chargers seemingly always experimenting in the secondary with who is playing and who's playing where and how much they're playing. It almost seems like there has been a constant rotation on the back end during Staley's tenure. Like, again, is Mike Davis going to be corner number one? Is Asante Samuel corner number one? Is it J.C. Jackson? Okay, who's corner number two? Okay, where are they playing Jasir Taylor? Okay, who's the nickel? Who's the other safety? Like, it's Derwin James and it's Alohi Gilman. Like, Dean Marlowe gets worked into there. Shout out to Dean Marlowe, who we love here at Cover One. It just seems like they, between health and performance, they've never been able to stand pat with a constant rotation on the back end. And I think that's contributed to the inconsistencies we see in Derwin James's game, and also where he has to be used, because they try to use him as this jack of all trades stopper, eraser type, which he can be. He's got this amazing skill set and frame and size and like traits. Like, he's a real tools up traits plus skill set guy. But I think at times he wears too many hats to the point that it comes at his detriment, or maybe even the detriment of the defense. But again, I think they try to have him wear all those hats because of the inconsistencies they have with other players at those positions in the secondary and overall, especially at the second level. Like, Kenneth Murray is okay at times, but also not really. Like, you look at just the holes that they've had at different times in the back seven, like, man, and I think that's contributed to why Derwin James has been kind of all over the place. Another interesting piece for this defense, Khalil Mack, who we talked about earlier on the show, in that draft where the Bills took Sammy Watkins instead of Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack is tied for third in sacks with 15, but they have come in significant bunches for him. So he's played in all 14 games for the Chargers this year. In 8 of those games, he had no sacks. He had 4 games with 2 sacks, 1 game with 1 sack, and then he had 1 game with 6 sacks. That was the matchup against the Raiders in week 4. He had 6 sacks in 1 game. So you remove that Raiders game, he's still having a fine year. If you remove that Raiders game, he's got 9 sacks in 13 games. So he's still performing well. He can still run through dudes. He still has that bull rush and some speed to power and juice. Still plays the run and sets the edge a little bit. I know he's getting a bunch of flack for kind of getting pancaked by Michael Mayer, the tight end for the Raiders in this past week. He still presents a threat on that outside. Maybe not as much as he used to be, and maybe even less now that Bosa isn't rushing on the opposite edge of him. But really interesting to see. Again, overall, you look at his numbers, and man, he's got 15 sacks in 14 games, but they have come in big-time bunches. Again, he's in 8 of his 14 games, he's had no sacks. 4 games with 2 sacks, 1 game with 1, and 1 game with 6. When you look at this defensive coverage scheme, I want to pull up another chart from, you guessed it, Next Gen Stats. Let's pull up Aiden O'Connell's passing chart from Week 15 versus the Raiders versus the Chargers. Get it together, Anthony. Boom. Let's pull it up. So a bit more balanced than Mr. Easton Stick in terms of getting the ball past 10 yards, but you can see the majority of where they were trying to attack in that game. Oh, actually, let me move the screen up there a little bit so you see that better. Boom. Okay, cool. There we go. So again, a little more balanced than Easton Stick, like pushing the ball a little bit more downfield, but really attacking the middle of the field, really attacking Kendricks and Murray in pass coverage in that spine in between the hashes and right outside the hashes. O'Connell throwing a ton to the right. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a thing that is, attack them to the right. But this Chargers defense, I love Asante Samuel Jr. I would still take him on my team, but he is kind of a boomer bust player at times. Like, you will see inconsistencies. He's a big game hunter. Actually, he kind of falls into like the pattern that his dad fell into when he was a corner with the Pats and especially with the Eagles. Like, Asante Samuel is trying to go for picks. He will make those big plays. He will jump routes. He will try and time things up. He will try and bait quarterbacks. He's a risk reward type of guy, boomer bust guy. And so that's why you have games for Asante Samuel where he has like 2 picks or 3 picks. And then you also have games, sometimes in that same game, where he gets burned really bad for a touchdown. Like, he's a risk reward type of corner. Maybe that changes a little bit. Again, with new leadership and play calling on the defensive side, now that Brandon Staley is out, but you've got that boomer bust type of player in Asante Samuel, which potentially could work against Josh Allen. Josh Allen likes to take risks himself. We'll see if Asante Samuel is able to get an interception, bait him into some things, present him a look, and then try and take advantage of it. But you're looking at this team, and again, like you got Asante Samuel at one corner, and then what are you looking at? Is it Michael Davis? Is Jasir Taylor going to be the nickel corner? Like, are they playing big nickel in this game? Are they playing traditional nickel? Like, what are they going to do? You look at, again, what Aiden O'Connell did against their defense and just really, again, peppered the middle of the field. And was able to really spread the ball around. Again, some of this is skewed by the game itself. Like maybe this passing chart looks different if they aren't just rolling and aren't up like 42-0 and 35-0 and 28-0 and so on and so forth. Like maybe they attack differently. Maybe they work the ball differently. Maybe they try some different things. So some of these numbers are skewed by that game script that they had. But this Chargers defense can be had. My big thing with the Chargers defense, I am treating them like the Cowboys defense, not from the perspective of they're the same defense or same alignment or same personnel or anything like that, but I'm running the ball down their throats if I'm the Buffalo Bills. I am running right at them. I am running tackle wrap, / dart. I am running that at them until they prove they can stop it. I'll run mid zone. I'll run duo. I will attack them through the spine over and over and over and over again. I am running right at them. I do not care. I'm running at Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson and Morgan Fox. Like I'm running at that crew. I'm running on the interior. I'm making Tui Pelotu have to play run defense. I'm probably running at Tui Pelotu a bunch. I still think Khalil Mack has something in the tank overall, but especially from a run defense standpoint, and I'd rather not test it if I don't have to, so I'll go away from him, although I do think he can be had. But I'm running it right down their throat. Establish the run early, get physical with them, take their soul. I say it all the time, like when you have the ball run down your throat, it is so demoralizing for a defense, and it takes your soul. It makes you feel like absolute crap. And so knowing how the Chargers lost in that game against the Raiders, knowing the firings that happened to Staley and Telesco after that game, I'm trying to do whatever I can to get them into negative feelings and negative vibes right off rip, and I'm running it down their throat. Run it down their throat, then tie in your RPOs and your pass tags, tie in the play action game, so on and so forth. I don't think this is a game. You can spread the Chargers out and pass on them if you want to. I just don't think you need to. I think you can operate in 12 personnel and work in, some 22, work in some jumbo, work in some 11, and still maintain your run game out of those personnel groupings and alignments. You can use condensed looks. You can go full spread. You can run dart with Kincaid or Knox attached to the formation. You can run it out of a traditional 2x2 gun look with a little more spread to it. I think you can get to a lot of the menu with this Bills offense in general, but especially against a defense like the Chargers that has not been sound in their run fits, that has not been sound in their run integrity, and that gets confused on the back end from a coverage standpoint. But again, for me, everything against this defense starts with their run defense, which has been bad all year. Again, where's my DVOA numbers? Oh yeah, 28th in DVOA. 28th versus the pass, 25th against the run. Their run defense gives up 20. They're 24th in EPA per attempt, and their pass defense is 27th in EPA per attempt. So it's kind of, pick your poison in terms of what you want to operate with and go with. But I'm running with a similar formula against Dallas. I'm establishing the run early. I'm trying to take them out of this game mentally and physically, take their soul early, make them not want to play this game and just want to pack it up and pack it in and go home. It's Christmas weekend. It's the 23rd. They're home already. Take their soul early with the run game, out physical them, run it down their throat, get downhill, create displacement, which you can do, and just make it an easy game for Josh Allen, provide him some easy buttons, and make the Chargers feel like, you know what, this sucks. Like our coach got fired, our GM got fired. It's the 23rd, tomorrow's Christmas Eve, whatever, or just make them feel like they're behind the 8 ball again. I'm starting out against this defense, running the football, and then again, tying in that RPO game. A lot of what they did against Dallas, which is a winning recipe going forward for this Bills offense, and something I want to talk about, what they did against Dallas. Myself and Eric are going to be doing full film video breakdown tomorrow night in the film room. I actually wanted to there were certain pieces I wanted to do from a film perspective on Disguised Coverage tonight, but Eric and I are saving a bunch of them for tomorrow in the film room. So make sure you tune in tomorrow night live, Wednesday, December 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern for the film room. But what Joe Brady did, man, the run game pieces, and these run game pieces were present before Joe Brady. I want to get that out of the way. And I'm going to say it tomorrow night in the film room too. Dart is a run concept that Ken Dorsey ran a ton last year and ran a ton this year. But Brady really just leaning into it and spamming the hell out of it against Dallas, and Dallas not adjusting was beautiful. And he said it like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. We had a different game plan, but we adjusted to this because of how it was working. What's nice with that, and I'm going to be tweeting a bunch of the offensive clips tomorrow and Thursday as well. And again, you'll see them in the film room with myself and Eric tomorrow. But what's nice with this Bills run game and with these concepts working out of shotgun, right? Everybody was talking about under center runs and under center runs and under center and under center and under center, which is fine, right? Those can work in their own right. But what Brady has started to do now is by incorporating more of Josh Allen's legs into the shotgun game, Josh Allen now becomes a threat to run out of shotgun when you have these RPO looks or these pass tag looks. And you saw it a bunch in the Dallas game. You saw it the week before too, but the Dallas game, there was so many. Like Allen's handed the ball off to James Cook and he moves like he's trying to threaten the outside, and it holds that backside edge defender. And when you have that, Allen basically accounts for that defender. So you take that defender out of the run fit. Say Dallas had a 6-man box, right? And you've got your 5 offensive linemen and a tight end. It's 6-on-6. Okay, cool. That's still advantage for the offense because there's one more gap than the defense can cover. But now, say Josh Allen hands it off to Cook and he's a threat to run. He makes a little move after the mesh. You hold that backside defender. Now that backside defender is out of the run fit, and it was already 6-on-6 advantage offense. Now it's 6-on-5 because you just held that backside defender. Now he's not crashing down the line to make a tackle or be involved in the run fit at all. And now you created another advantage. Joe Brady just leaned into that tackle wrap dart concept in a multitude of ways out of different alignments, condensed, spread, tight end detached, 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 21, 22 jumbo, all these pieces. It was a really nice job from him leaning into an aspect that worked and just spamming the hell out of it. Sometimes it's just as easy as, oh, well, this thing is working. Let's see if they're going to stop it. Oh, they haven't stopped there. Let's just keep going to it. Again, they would have ran tackle wrap dart like they would have continued to run that anyway because it is a core run concept for them and one of their better ones that fits James Cook's running style and fits, Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins and their line up front and, Cyrus Torrence being able to climb and pin guys down and McGovern's athleticism being able to turn and seal, Mitch Morse's intelligence and being able to climb, turn and seal and work in space, all these things. So they would have ran it in general a bunch in that game if they wanted to commit to the run, but just keeping the foot on the throat with that concept was absolutely beautiful. And I'm looking for a similar game plan against the Chargers because I would look for that game plan on a weekly basis from the Bills. If the Bills have a legitimate run game, which they do, the Bills have one of the best run games in the entire NFL from a running back carry standpoint. I've talked about it all year. They've been like top 2 and top 3 week in and week out for the majority of the year with just running back carries only. If you have a legitimately threatening run game with James Cook and how good this offensive line is at run blocking, they're second in adjusted line yards, which means the offensive line is cooking and doing work up front. It's the reason, Cook, Murray, Ty Johnson, like they're all seeing success because the offensive line is moving and grooving when it comes to the run game. They found concepts that work. They execute them at a high level. They've got a good run game plan. If the Bills, and I've said it for years, if the Bills have a legitimately threatening run game, you pair that with Josh Allen, how do you defend this offense? How? Because at any point they can just put you in spread. They can go 3-by-2, or they can go into a 4 strong, or they can go into a 2-by-2 gun, and they can do it out of 10 personnel or 11, or it can be, 12 personnel, but they can split out Kincaid and Knox. And then if you've matched with heavier personnel, now those bigger dudes have to cover in space against these athletic tight ends. Like, that they still have that fastball element to their offense. Like, they can spread you out and take advantage of you with Josh Allen whenever they want. And if you're really trying to focus on the weapons, Josh Allen can scramble and create something off script, or he can run in that scramble and gain yards on the ground. And then you add in the design Josh Allen run game and what that does. But when you've got the traditional running back run game working, just how do you defend this Bills offense? Like, again, what I've continued to talk about, like they have that fastball that's there, but now they have a legitimately killer secondary pitch. Whether you want to call it a changeup, curveball, slider, breaking ball, off-speed stuff, whatever. The fastball is still present, but now they have a secondary pitch that is also extremely dangerous to the point where they can just throw the secondary pitch and still get you out at the plate. That secondary pitch isn't so much of, we got to throw it just to keep you honest, but the real stuff is the fastball. No, like that secondary pitch is legitimate and you have to respect it. And if you don't, they'll catch you with it. They can paint the black with that secondary pitch. They can throw it and confuse the hell out of you. Like it's a real nice pivot that they have. And they're not just throwing it again. They're not just throwing it to keep you honest. They're not just throwing it so you're not just sitting on fastball. They're throwing it because it works. So how do you defend that if you're a defense? Just in preparation and in-game execution, and then all the pieces that you can stack on top of it with the RPOs and the pass tags and the play action. And it's just a lot for a defense to have to deal with. And that's why, again, it's going to be a core. It's going to be a core idea and a core aspect to establish week in and week out, regardless of the opponent. But especially in this matchup against the Chargers, who have struggled with run fits and struggled with run integrity and gap discipline and all that kind of stuff, run it down their throats, take advantage schematically, but also kind of plant the seeds mentally of another here we go type of week. Take their soul early, make it an easy trip to LA, get in, get the dub, get home for Christmas. I anticipate that kind of piece. Like that's just what you need to do against this Chargers defense. There's other ways to beat them as well. I'm going to be diving into more tape to get a proper sample size, but knowing who they are and watching them a bunch already, and again, seeing the metrics, run down their throat, take their soul early, take them out of the game early, get yourself the opportunity to kind of sit and rest mentally and physically on the back end of this game and get out with a win, and then go home and get ready for New England at home, and then get ready for the Miami Dolphins coming out of that. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we are about to get out of here. Again, before anybody leaves, please, and thank you. If you haven't already, drop a like on this video. Again, it goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. I know it's corny to ask for those likes and corny to kind of shell out for it at times, but again, they do mean a lot to myself and the entire team. So if you haven't already, please drop a like on this video. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. And subscribe to Disguised Coverage while you're here on YouTube as well, in addition to the Cover One channel as a whole. We have you covered every single day of the week with Buffalo Bills coverage. Depends on, whatever level of depth or entertainment you're looking for. There's a variety of shows to fit whatever you're looking for, anything and everything Buffalo Bills and football related. Thank you very much to everybody who rode with me live here on this episode tonight. I know it's a holiday week and against a team that people are kind of just feeling like, whatever. So I appreciate everybody joining in. I had really good attendance tonight. So thank you folks very much for tuning in live into this episode. Thank you very much for the kind words and everything coming in the chat there. I see it all and I recognize it, and I appreciate you folks. Thank you very much for the kind words. Thank you very much to Mr. Alex Brasky for joining me in the front portion of this episode with that Buffalo Bills pulse check, coming out of the chaos from really since Dorsey was fired, but really all year, and just kind of getting a pulse on, and a beat on where this team is, what they are right now, and who they could be going forward, given the road that they are on and the road that they have to travel. So thank you very much to Mr. Alex Brasky. Thank you very much to you folks for riding with me live on this episode. If you didn't ride with me live, that's cool too. Thank you very much for your post live, listen, view, download, whatever have you. If you enjoyed this episode, tell your family, friends, and loved ones about it. If they're a Bills fan or even just a general football fan, word of mouth is always a tremendous help to myself and the entire brand. So please tell your family, friends, and loved ones about the show. If you thought this show was terrible, that's cool too. Tell your enemies about the show and try and ruin their day with this show. I appreciate the pettiness. Any press is good press. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and being safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I love Christmas, and I hope you folks all have a tremendous Christmas or tremendous holiday, whatever you celebrate, whatever you recognize. I always think the holidays are a really special time potentially for people. So I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones have a tremendous holiday. And if you're not having a tremendous holiday, or if you have the opportunity to help others who are not having a tremendous holiday, I suggest you do so. Again, I love Christmas time. I love this time of year, but I also recognize that sometimes it's not a great time for people. So whatever you can do to, bring some joy to people, I think that's awesome if you can do so. But regardless of that, appreciate you folks. Be kind to one another. Enjoy the holidays with your family. Enjoy the food, enjoy the presents, the lights. If you're living somewhere where it snows, hopefully you get a white Christmas. If you're not into a white Christmas, that's fine. Enjoy your green Christmas or whatever you got. I will see you folks tomorrow, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, December 20th. For another episode of the Cover One Film Room with Eric Turner. So join us live tomorrow night, Wednesday, December 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then next week, Tuesday, December 26th, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Disguise More Than You Will Possibly Know. Again, take care. Happy holidays. Godspeed. And as always,